Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today's episode, I have thoughts, complexity. My name is Glenn Gers, and I am Writing for Screens. I am the one who created this channel. I have done so to try to pass on some tips and skills and techniques and insights that I got in a 25-year career writing for TV and movies. On my way out of the business, I am trying to leave behind some of the things I had to teach myself because I think they might be useful. And the point for this is that there is no right or wrong way to do it. These are just things for you to try. Every artist must figure out their own goals, their own path, figure out their own reality and their own abilities, and try to work out their particular way of doing it. So all you can do is gather up all the different ways that other people have done it and see if those are any good for you. If they work, use them. If they don't, throw them away. That's the point. Now, in order to help you with this, I have created this channel. This is a little screen grab of the channel main page. If you look down, you will see a bunch of playlists. Here's a close-up. These first three playlists on the page: Screenwriting Essentials, Screenwriting Tools, Skills, and Craft, and The Process, Being a Writer. These are where I have tried to condense my thoughts down to very useful, succinct 10-minute lesson videos. They are just filled with little insights and tips and skills that you might try. Each one of these has its own very clear thumbnail and title to tell you what kind of stuff it's about. It can be about flashbacks or dialogue or character. Please look through them. I would advise watching as many as you can. There are 50 of them. They're each only about 10 minutes, and you can watch them at your leisure for free. So please do. Anything you want to know from me, it's probably already in those videos. But in case that's not enough, I come to you live every Wednesday, if I can make it, at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Zone, which is what it is now, and here I am to talk about a topic that I think might be of interest. But before I get to that, I'm going to say some hellos. Hello, Pelicans. Nice to see ya. And Nathan Hasko, not the pirate. Hi. Sonia, hello. And Jas Paul, good to see you. Darian, hello. Hi. Gregors, I have not, have I met you yet? Nice to see you. Michael, hello. Jean and her ward, hello. And J. Mario Torre, indeed, hello. Okay, let's get to the topic and then we will open it up to questions. The topic for today is, oops, I've got too much stuff open here. Okay, the topic for today is complexity and the question of whether or not we should be trying to make things simple. Here's how this came to my mind. Yesterday, I took a hike here in California, and I was on a hike through nature. And I took some pictures, which I wanted to show you, of nature. Here's the thing about this nature stuff. It's very complicated. What I was noticing is if you look at this little glimpse of nature, this little section, little cross section of everyday average nature in life, look at how many things are going on here. Look at how many plants, how many different kinds, how many stages of life. Each one extremely delicate, let me see if I can even, no, can't do it. But the point is, this knocks me out. I see this all the time, and I just think, wow, if you look around at anything in nature, what you see is incredible complexity. Nature is complicated. Life is complicated. There's a lot of it, and every little piece has its own existence, its own story, its own place in the bigger picture. And honestly, on an average day, if you really look around at that, it's pretty overwhelming. It's an overload of stuff, and it's incomprehensible. What does it mean that there is all this stuff going on. So I believe that one of the reasons we invented art, one of the purposes of art, a central purpose of art, is to give shape or meaning to the complexity of life. In other words, we go through life absorbing a huge amount of stuff, and one of the things that we invented art to do is to try and give it some form, some sense of what it means or even what it is. Like if you're standing in a field and you actually look at all the different pieces and all the things that are going on, it's too much. So what art does is say, hey, this is a field. It's here to keep the mountains apart, or it's here to let the foxes run free. Whatever it is, we give it meaning. Now, that's not necessarily the meaning. It's not necessarily the right meaning, but that's what art does. And the interesting thing about that is you have to think about how does art do that. I think some of the main ways that art gives meaning to the complicatedness of life is that they say, like, this is more important. Like to say, this field is here for it to, this is the place where a battle is going to take place, or a place that the battle did take place, or this is a place where certain things happen, or where I get a certain feeling. In other words, we give a quality or an element some importance. We say, this is why we are looking at this field. This is why this field is here, basically. The other thing that we do is we tend to collect all these little bits. Like we look at all these leaves of grass, these wild sticks and thorns and bushes, and we say, that's a field. That's it. It's just a field. It's one field. It's a million little pieces, each of which has its own life and story. So very often what we're doing is we're abstracting or simplifying. We are saying the point of this field is that it was a battlefield, or the point of this field is that it's a collection of flat grasses. That, in other words, what we're doing is we're saying, I'm going to look at this monstrous complexity, and I'm going to say this is what it's about, or this is how it works, something like that. Now that's good. I mean, I'm not saying that this is a problem. I'm saying that this is one of the things you want to be doing. The problem, I believe, has become, especially in screenwriting, is that this idea about making things simple, of finding one thing about it that is important, becomes the goal of art. In other words, the point of art is to basically throw away the complexity of life and give you an easy answer, a simple answer, to say, this is the hero's journey. Or, and there's nothing wrong with the hero's journey, but it's an oversimplification of life. Or it's a theme that you can state in one sentence. That's a big thing for Hollywood. Or that there's a decisive resolution. These are beliefs that are standard in teaching screenwriting that I want to ask a question about. I want you to think about this question, which is that a good idea? Is that the goal? It's not that simplicity is necessarily is in any way a bad thing. You must use it. You must find your way into it. However, it's not the point. Once again, I've said I believe one of the main points, the purpose of art, is to give shape or meaning to the complexity of life. Not to deny it, not to say, no, it's not really that complicated. There's a single hero, and that's the person. That's an oversimplification, I believe. It can be used to show the complexity of life. The life of Odysseus, a little slice of life of Odysseus that we get in the Odyssey, covers many, many things. I don't mean to say that there is no value to simplifying, but I do want to raise the question of, when you start to learn about how to do screenwriting, especially, you tend to learn the only thing we are trying to do is get things simple, is to make it easy. I honestly believe that is kind of lazy. I'm going to do a quick check here of the comments. We've got a lot of comments coming on. Hello, Alex. Yeah, I don't know why you don't get the notice either. I apologize. Is anybody getting notifications when this thing goes live? Let me know. Okay. Sonia said, I read this phrase somewhere. God hates straight lines, numbers, etc. Therefore, the universe, and nature, of course, is complex by design. Fair. I have no idea. I am not sure if it's God or nature or life or us. I don't know where this is coming from, but I do know that actually what's interesting is how much of the time humankind, has added simplicity, has added straight lines or numbers or easy answers. That's our contribution to the complexity of life, frankly. And it is a gorgeous thing. I'm a big fan of civilization in any of its many, many forms. Even civilization is very complicated. There are lots of them. And that's actually my point. I am not anti-humanity. I am not anti-civilization. I am anti-oversimplification. Sometimes, now and then it's nice to have a hero's journey. Now and then it's nice to have things be simplified. The danger for me, the thing I worry about is, especially in screenwriting, there is a belief that there is only simplification, that there is only a unified, simple answer. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, Nacho and MC squared. I'm gonna call you MC squared, whether or not that's how you wanted it to be. That interpretation is threading a fine line. The interpretation that things should be simple. Modern art does follow this interpretation. I'm not sure which interpretation you mean, Philip. Let me know. Hello, Alex. Nice to see you and your potted plants. I think academia takes something simple and complicates it. I think that there are times that academia loves a good complication, but I wouldn't say that that's the usual or only thing that academia does. I can't slam academia that way. Okay. Philip says, it's hardly admirable. I don't think you should be teaching this as a standard. Art originated to entertain. Let's argue that in a minute. Let me finish my thought, and then we'll get back to that one. Okay, Sonia got the notification. Alex, I do not know why. Maybe turn it off and turn it back on. Thank you, Joni Does. Joni Doe, sorry. Joni Doe Shadow, not Joni Does Shadow. Okay. Philip's saying, we're going to get to you, Philip. I see what you're saying. Let me finish my thoughts. Okay. Pelicans and Najo are reporting notifications. And Thumper is also, I don't think that is what academics are doing. Academics, separate question. Let's get to that in a minute. Let me finish up my thoughts on complexity. So here's the deal. I believe that one of the things that you want to do is try to present the complexity, but still illuminate the shape of it or your. In other words, instead of saying, "Oh, it's simple," to say it's complicated, but I see this shape in it. I see this meaning or value in it. Especially to say I see, not this is the only way. This is the right way. We are. Say it as you want to, but consider the fact that the goal is not to only see and show simplicity, simplified, abstracted. That the idea may be to say this is complicated, but within that complication, I see this overarching theme or shape that I believe that industrialization is good or bad. Either one. I'm not dictating a theme. I'm suggesting that what you want to do is say it's not so easy as to just say, boom, that's it. This is the answer. This explains everything. That what you want to try to do is present the complexity. You want to have some sense of the complexity within your simplified artwork. Now, how do you do that? Let's talk about how do you. It's very hard to present complexity in the compressed form that is a movie. especially a movie. If you get if you're working on something that's a series where you're talking about 68 hours or something, or even like 6 hours, you've got a lot more room to move to present other sides to things or to present complications. But when you're talking about a movie of 90 to 120 minutes, you are stripping things down very, very deeply. And so I would suggest that very often you are suggesting complexity more than actually capturing it. How do you do this? How do you get complexity into your art? I would say it's important to give some depth, some thought to more than one character. If you are only focusing on, everything is focused on one character, and therefore the rest of them are simply props to be used in that character's story, you're cheating. You're cheating the complexity of life. And that's even if you are going to tell an extremely simple story. You still want to do that. Adding layers of plot or subplot is another way to do it. In other words, to say, yes, this is happening, but at the same time, this other thing is happening. This may have an effect on it. That's all workable. But when you have a very, very stripped down, simple plot that has one central character doing one central thing, it tends to be a little simplified. And then the other question is whether or not you can allow for some sense that your resolution is not easy. It's not simple. It's not, now we know everything we need to know and it's all done. There's some ambivalence or mixed feelings or uncertainty within a good resolution. I'm not saying don't resolve your story necessarily, though you may not. We talk about complexity. There's a movie out now called Past Lives. I like it a lot. I think it's good. It's very, very simple. There's really just three characters. I was about to say three main characters, but really there's a woman and two men in her life. And it really takes place basically mostly in the course of a couple of days. And these are not extraordinary people. It's a story of a woman who had her childhood in Korea. And then her parents emigrated to Canada, and then she moved to America. When she was young, when she was still a school kid, she had a best friend, a guy who was her soulmate in childhood, and then she had to leave because her parents took her away, and their bond was broken, and she really didn't have much contact with him. Now, 20 or 30 years later, she meets him again. She has an encounter with him again. He comes to visit her. She has since married. And it's simply about how these three characters deal with the fact that she had this person in her life who was deeply connected to her and in love with her. And she, in her way, was in love with him. But time has changed. Things have moved on. And yet, and new feelings have arisen. She is married now, happily. That's all there is to the story. It's just about these people getting together and talking about their lives, and that's it. And yet there is a great deal of complexity. I want to talk about how they do that, because one of the ways they do that is simply giving depth, giving thought to each of the three characters. There's only three characters. That's pretty simple. And yet, three human beings, it's complicated. And giving each one some moments of insight or empathy, that's giving it complexity. Okay, so and this is also not to say that you cannot have a very complicated plot, which can give a sense of, which can often bring a complication. I'm not saying that simplicity is one or the other. I'm saying it's good to consider that you are not trying to strip everything down to an easy answer. That's my point. One of the ways that it's really important to understand complexity is to remember that complexity is the combination of simple things. When you look at this tangle of stuff, the fact is, if you look closely enough, every single stick is its own thing, and as such, it's relatively simple. When you put them together, you get that complexity. Now the question is, what are the shapes? What is the story? Is this going to be a story about that big tree, or about that patch of bright dying sticks in the center, or is it going to be about the green stuff in the background? I'm not saying that one is right or wrong. I'm saying look at all that. You have to decide how you are going to tell that story. You're going to give insight into that thing. And when you do that, you're going to find yourself building down to simplicity. The story of past lives is essentially a simple story. However, by putting together the complexity of the situation in the three simple characters. So the main thing about all of this is I'm not trying to advocate for complexity or against simplicity. What I'm trying to talk about is the balance. I'm going to talk more and more as time goes by about this concept of balancing. There's many, many parts to art which are, in essence, unsolvable. Simplicity and complexity, there's not a right answer. It's not like you could say, make everything simple, or, make everything complicated. That is not the point. My point is to recognize that you need to balance those two things in every single work. The balance can be different work to work. It's not like there's a right balance. Each person and each work that each person does has to adjust their balance. In one, they may say, I'm going to keep this super, super, super simple. There's an old movie called Marty about this sort of ordinary guy in New York who wants a date. It's really very, very simple. And yet, there is emotional richness in that story. Then you get something like Lord of the Rings, okay? Complicated. There's all these different types of person, all these different countries, all the different characters within them have their own histories and their own goals. Massive complexity. It's always a balance. That is the important thing I'm trying to say is keep an eye on how you are balancing simplicity and complexity when you work. That's my goal. That's just to talk about how, because in the business in Hollywood and the business of teaching about how to get into Hollywood, they tend to go all in on simplicity, on this is the answer, on this is how a story works. And they don't even acknowledge the value, the necessity of complexity, the way that life feels complicated. And if you strip all the complexity out of a story, you strip the life out of it, in my opinion. The basic message here is, life is complicated. Life is complicated. So you need to think about your beliefs. When you look at that complicated tangle of trees, which one is important to you? What are your principles? Which things matter to you? What do you love? What do you want? And then you have to act according to those principles and work according to those principles as much as you can. There's going to be a balance, because you're going to need to balance the needs of whoever you're collaborating with or being paid by with your beliefs about life. But what I'm saying is that you cannot be an artist without taking a look at life and seeing its complication and then figuring out how you are going to personally work with that. That's my point. That as everyone advocates that the answer for you is going to be make it simple, find the simple answer, get the easy answer, and make it easy for the audience, I just wanted to point out that life is complicated. And we each give it shape and we give it meaning in our work based on what we see, what we believe, and what we feel that means. That's what the principles are. And that you need to take that seriously and act upon it. Okay, let me go back. Let's talk about some of these comments, because we got to. Glenn, I think I know exactly what you're saying, but then look where I am. Where are you? Other than Ward 6. Tell me where you are and let me know why that's not okay. Regarding notifications, if you're not getting notifications and you're using a tablet or a cell phone, check your YouTube app settings. A bit of practical advice from Joni Doe. Thank you, Joni Doe. I am always amazed how complex a movie or limited series can get in story. Yes, this is what I'm saying. I I have seen episodes of sitcoms. Okay, we're talking about 22 minutes, and some of them are like ridiculously silly sitcoms, like Always Sunny in Philadelphia. In 22 minutes, they can get extraordinarily complicated. Complicated in the twists and turns within the setup and the story, and in terms of the understanding of the characters and lives. And that's a short, okay? 22 minutes. They do good. Hey, she breathes. Hey. Okay. I think Tolstoy believed high art needed education to be appreciated. He felt art is understood through the sincerity of the artist. Two separate things really there. Understanding through the sincerity of the artist would be, anyone should be able to do that. You should be able to feel the sincerity even if you don't understand what's going on. Education, there is a question of, in any particular art form, there's going to be an entry level, a simplified or an accessible version, and then there are going to be more complicated forms, which you need to think about or be educated in or get used to. And as the art form, as any art forms tend to start very simple and then build in their complexity as generations of artists learn the ins and outs of how it works, and bring in new things to it. So I do believe that some art, almost all art requires education in the sense that you have to learn how it works, like you have to encounter it and learn about it. But you can often learn about it just through dealing with it, just through enjoying it and exploring it. You don't need to go to school to understand art. There are some things that school can teach you about various arts, but you don't need education. I mean, and if Tolstoy did say that, I disagree with Tolstoy then. It happens. Okay, so let's get back to Philip, who is disagreeing with me. Art originated in the court of the local king. I disagree with that. Here, there's healing in real art because it serves a natural function in the community tribe. Interrupting art can be necessary. Do you mean interrupting art like the art is interrupting? Or do you mean interrupting the art? Anyway, my point is I do not feel that art originated in the court of the king. There is art before there were kings. There's art when there were just people in caves. And there may have been kings in those caves. We don't really know. But we do know that as long as there have been people, there seems to have been art of some form. People tend to craft. People tend to create. And there were probably stories. Hard to tell because it's very hard to capture a story until you have written language. But very likely people were telling stories in those caves or in whatever tribes there were. I believe as soon as you developed language, you have a story. I would argue it's very possible we thought in stories before we even had language for it. Okay. Nobody says whodunits come to mind. Until resolved or found, it's pretty complex. It's simple once shown how or who, but how it is portrayed can be complex or on the nose. Yes, this is very true. In other words, let's talk about the form of the whodunit as a way that you can either be oversimplifying or showing complexity. There is a simple core to a whodunit, which is a thing has been done, probably a bad thing, but not always. But my guess is almost all whodunits have a crime at the heart. And this crime is a mystery in some sense. We don't know who did it, or we don't know why it was done, or how it was done. Something is unknown. But we have some facts, we have some evidence, we have some reality of the thing having happened. And then the character or characters, there's some whodunits where you have a bunch of people trying to solve it together. Those people are uncovering elements, and that's where I think you get complexity, because the truth is you've got the simplicity. There's a dead body on the grass, okay? But just like in the rest of the story, in any kind of complex situation, there's a lot of people involved. A life is as complicated as this, okay? Anybody's life has as much going on. There's so many aspects to any human being, and what they do and where they're from and what they like and what they are like. So one of the things that happens in a whodunit is you start to get information, little extra twigs and sticks that are filling in the complicated picture of how this person ended up dead. or missing or whatever it is that they did, or had ended up killing. Sometimes the whodunit is, why did you do that? So the answer is, in putting together those pieces, some of them are going to show insight into other things. And that's where the complexity shows up. If it's all just clues to one event, without insight into the people, without insight into the world or the events, it's a cool puzzle, but it won't feel rich or complex. So yes, whodunits are a very good way to understand that. I'm gonna side with I'm not gonna side with, but I happen to agree that art originated with human beings before there were various cultural forms. She breathes in, says, I like complexity, but my favorite definition of complexity, many simple things coming together. Yes, yeah. One of the things about, my point is, when I look at those fields, I was struck by the fact that it was incomprehensible until I thought about it's a field. In other words, I abstracted it. So yes, the whole point of these art forms is that they are taking the complexity, the complicatedness of life, and giving it within the art piece a shape, a form, a meaning. That's not real in a sense. That's the art. That's the layer of artisticness, is the fact that we are looking at the pile of sticks and saying, this is the story of that tree that's growing out of those dying things. Or this is the story of those dying things. Or this is the story of one of those dying things. Any one of those is a legitimate piece of art. My point is, you need to be aware that you got to figure that out when you look at things. That if all you do is say, I'm going to tell a story of a tree, and that tree is just standing in a blank space made by writing teachers in Hollywood, and I'm doing this based on other trees that were the center of other stories, you're just going to be doing a thing that's based on other works of art with no life in it. And so my point is that the value of art is the way it takes complexity and gives it a shape or a meaning. To say, this field leads to the lake, or this field is where the sun sets. Whatever it is that you want, you choose. We choose the meaning that our art gives. All movies have a lesson. Wizard of Oz was a great movie. I can't agree with that. I don't believe all movies have a lesson. Some raise a question. Some present a situation and say, you figure it out. I can't agree that all movies have a lesson. The novice writer says I think a lot of people misunderstand simplistic structures like the hero's journey. They are the starting point of a story. Yes, very, very, very true. But are used to edit down the overwhelming mess you create. Exactly. The overwhelming mess you create because you are trying to capture the overwhelming mess of life. That's what happens. That when you start to, and this is a question that a lot of people ask, and this is why I'm trying to talk about this. They'll say, I got too much stuff in my story, I can't organize it. And my answer is, yes, that's okay. That is part of it. You will need to organize it, but the answer is not just strip it down to zero, just strip it down to one thing. That could eventually be your choice. But my point is, the structures are a starting point for you to give a form to the complexity of life. Your version of Hero's Journey should be different than someone else's because of the things in life you are choosing to give meaning and shape to this story. The details that you are adding to that simple handed down structure is what gives it life. What I'm saying is, unfortunately, a lot of people are learning the lesson. I don't need to add that layer of life. I just need to do the simplified structure. That's what I am warning against, because unfortunately, a lot of people take this teaching either too literally, or the teachers are too insistent that they are the only way. And all I'm trying to say is, life is complicated, and your job as an artist is to recognize it, to respect it, to try and capture your version of it within a form that you are choosing to use. Novice writer says, it's the same with knowing the story's theme. It's not that this is all that matters, but once you can understand that core seedling, yes, very, very true, then you can understand where everything else blossomed from. Yes, we're saying the same thing in different ways, which is I'm saying, yes, you choose a shape, you choose a meaning, you choose a core, you choose a story, you choose a form. And within that, you then have to think and discover and add the truth of life within that. Or you are looking at life and saying, I am going to tell the story of this part of it because that means something to me. When I saw your photo and the question of focus, I thought of Van Gogh and his focal point. Yes, absolutely. I think you will often, this is, I believe, often, you can learn from almost any art, in music, painting, photography, that focal point. There's an essay about Cartier-Bresson, the photographer, and talking about, I believe there was a concept of the punctum. I can't remember which philosopher of photography, but the point is that there's a point in every photograph, which is the focal point, is the meaningful detail, the thing that's either out of the ordinary or most clearly seen, or in some way giving you some shape and meaning to the capturing of a very complex thing, which is visual reality. No problem with the typo. I mean to say structures like the hero's journey work best after a story has been drafted to rein all that in. That's that. I wouldn't even go so far as to say you have to do it in one order or the other. Some people, I apologize. There is a truck outside which is grinding up trees. Actually interesting. You know, they cut the trees and then they put it in the wood chipper, like in Fargo. That is unfortunately going on right now. I apologize. It's happening like right outside my house. Okay. The question of whether or not you have to apply the structure before or after you write. Not necessarily. You could say, I'm going to write the classic structure, the classic whodunit, the classic hero's journey, and I'm going to find, and by finding my version of it, by finding the version where my hero's journey is about a bunch of teenage gang members in 1970s New York trying to get from one end of the city to the other, the Warriors, or my story is about the story of this schlubby guy in Brooklyn named Marty who wants a girlfriend, then you are bringing the life into the form. That's legit, as legit as saying I'm going to throw in life and then find a form and put it on. Either one is fine. There is no right order to do this in if you are productively doing it. Wow, I am so sorry. Award 6 is where I am. Yes, we are all in Award 6 of one type or another, and that's okay. Okay. It's a skill to take something complicated and break it down so it will be simpler, but in essence, yes, that is exactly. Not is it only a skill, it is the point as far as I'm concerned. To take something complicated like life. Life is complicated. And our job as artists is to recognize that you can't do all of it. So you're part of what you're doing is giving it an artificial form. And that artificial form will be artificially simple, and yet that simplicity is incredibly important to us humans. I'm not saying that simplicity is bad. It's a balance. Okay. Hello, the novice writer. Wasn't Tolstoy writing to his class? Yes, that's the other thing. You very often get someone who's coming up with an artistic theory because they're working within a very set culture and art form. And so therefore they come up with a theory and they say like, this is the universal truth of art. And it's usually not if they're talking, like for instance, Aristotle. Aristotle's a very great philosopher, but one of the main things he talks about in his just talking about poetic art is he talks about the relative value of slave characters and non-slave characters. Like, we probably should not have slavery, and slavery should not be part of art. That's my take. Anyway, hi Goldie. Good to see you. Yeah, Michael. Yes, absolutely. Tolstoy lived in a country where a small aristocratic group were literate, and a large majority of the people were essentially serfs or slaves. They were held to the land and illiterate. And obviously, then you can say probably an illiterate person is not going to be able to read a book. So it is. Learning literacy is going to be an element of enjoying the art form of writing. Yes, in that sense, sure, absolutely. It's interesting because beauty is what inspires art. Well, beauty is what inspires some art. Some art is inspired by rage or politics or dissatisfaction. How would complexity work in a slapstick movie? Oh, absolutely. Blazing Saddles is actually pretty complex. There's no an individual act of slapstick. Actually, even that is not that simple. I mean, if you look at the Rube Goldbergness of some slapstick, it's gorgeous and complicated. So I would say just because it's funny or just because it's operating with obvious types, simplified stereotypes, does not mean that the story is not capturing complexity. Very often, a very, very simplified. I mean, honestly, a lot of animation is working that way. There's a lot of stories. I am not saying that we have to reproduce reality. I am saying that we have to recognize the complexity of even a simple story. In which case, in Blazing Saddles, there's layers of having fun with the movie stereotypes. There's also having fun with the society that it was made in and poking holes in the social constructs which it is making fun of. There's enough complexity, I think, in Blazing Saddles. Even good children's stories, yes. Even children's stories, the good ones, show a glimpse of the complexity of life, the universe, or the human condition. Yes, exactly. A good children's story, a good children's story is a good story. I completely agree. There is no value contest between complexity and simplicity. They are a balance. If you don't have some simplicity, you can't understand the complexity. If you don't have some complexity, you don't get anything from the simplicity. It's a balance. Okay. Is beauty the raw, unstructured material? For some people. Some people's art is not about beauty at all. Some people's art is about, let's look at the harsh, ugly reality of life. That's cool too. Hi, Dorian. I'm terribly sorry about the noise. How do you? This is a good question. How do you make something simple enough to be simple? Oops, I'm sorry. I accidentally put my elbow on the keyboard. How do you make something simple enough to be simple part of complex structure without stripping it down? Without really. Yes. Once again, complexity is the combination of simple things. For instance, if you decide to tell a super simple story about a hero's journey to get a pot of gold from a giant, okay, the people that they meet along the way, or the things that they must learn along the way, the things we understand about the character and why they are doing this, the things that simple journey may reflect about society at large, those are all ways that you get complexity. How do we do this? You give depth to more than one character. You add layers of plot to subtitle. These are alternatives. This is not something you have to do with every story. I'm just saying that among the ways that we find complexity are by if you have a simple let's take the Odyssey, okay? Because there's an existing bit of IP. It's the story of this guy. It's a very smart general and king of his country, but he has left 10 years before to fight a war. Frankly, a lot of people thought wasn't worth fighting, but he did it. He survived it, and now he is trying to get home. And it takes him another 10 years to get home. Okay, that is a simple story. Guy's trying to get home. His wife is trying to fend off the suitors who are saying, hey, he's been gone for 10 years. He's dead. Let's get it on. So there's first of all, a complexity, because we've got Odysseus, who is a fighter and a warrior and a general. We have Odysseus, who is an adventurer and explorer. In other words, in the 10 years, he runs into different places and finds different things. Now, that, in a sense, makes the story complicated. It's not like he just gets on his boat. It takes 10 years worth of straight sailing to get there. He runs into things. That adds complexity. He is the leader of his men, but he is also a man who falls in love, a man who has to deal with threats. There's many things that happen during Odysseus's simple story. Does that make sense? Try and let me know if that makes sense, Goldie. What I'm saying is, you do need to think about the simplicity of each piece. When it comes down to it, each moment of a story is relatively simple, but the weight coming into it is often complex, and you need to decide which piece of it you're going to show simply, knowing that at some other time you'll show another piece of it. That's often how we do complexity. There is no one answer. There is no one, this is how you get things to be complicated, or this is how you get simple. Excuse me. The point that I'm trying to make is that you need to be aware of the need for both. We see complexity through the eyes of the character, sometimes through the eyes of the viewer. Yeah, but Hitchcock could be complex. Shadow of a Doubt's quite complex. Psycho is actually pretty complex. Go give them money. I would, but they are also, what they're doing is they're taking the trees down that are hitting the power line. So I want them to do that, because that's a good thing. How do you convert your complexness into a digestible story without resorting to stripping things down? You do strip things down. The point is, you don't strip them down so much that you have nothing left. My point is that many ways of teaching or understanding, especially screenwriting, seems to be more and more saying, strip it down until it's easy. And my point is, strip it down till it works to tell your story. Strip it down until it has a shape and meaning. Okay? Once again, a purpose of art, not the only one, but one, is to give shape or meaning to the complexity. In other words, to say, I'm going to tell a story that has some complexity, like this person may have done good and bad. This person may want things and the price may be high. We must change sometimes in order to get things. These are complex feelings. You have to think, how can I tell that in a set of relatively simple steps? Because no matter what you do, you're going to be stripping it down to the simplicity of your form. So I am not saying don't simplify. I'm saying figure out where and why you are simplifying, and try to, within your simplifying, the needed simplicity, find ways to give richness of life, complexity. Let's hope that we are not Fargoing out there. Woody, good. I'm glad. Okay, good. Yes, a complex situation indeed. Yes, thank you. Okay. Hi, reply me. I'm, hi, understanding. It's nice to meet you or to see you. Let me know what to reply to. Strangelove was complex, scary, and funny. Absolutely. There is no end to the amount of good art that is both complicated and simple. Strangelove is Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Love the Bomb, is a movie that has a lot of complexity but is in essence the simple story of a terrible mistake that causes nuclear war. And so, like, I can simplify it. I can say this is a story of how the system by which it was a critique of the system of the nuclear arms race, the belief that the nuclear arms race would deter the use of nuclear weapons. And it was a critique of that. And you can simplify it down to that. You can say that. However, the way that they told it allowed for the complexity of different characters, different insights, different ideas. Okay. Roland Barthes, yes, that's right. Thank you. What a great audience. The Roland Barthes spoke of the punctum of an image, a thing that stands out in photography. Damn, that is exactly right. That is a blast from the past for me. I'd still argue that we're not able to create art without seeing the beauty in anger, sadness. Okay, yeah, that's fair. I mean, if you choose to say this this way, you could say that art is the beautification of all things. That is a fair argument. That is a fair definition. It's not everybody's, but it is a good. If you want to live by that, it's totally cool. Ruskin Bond writes about nature and children and human nature in very simple, poetic ways. They get very complex sometimes. Yes, absolutely. It is possible to have a simple image or a simple story or a simple way of speaking that is extremely powerful. Absolutely. Roland Barthes' punctum is something subjective that each person takes from the image. It affects the emotions. Looking at different photos, everyone will find a different punctum. That's interesting, and I would go with it. The nose is audible noise, I think, although the nose is sometimes audible. Thank you. I'm glad. Thank you. Okay, good. All right. Hi, Donna. Pilot scripture. Oh yeah. Thank you. For those of you who want to know more about my idea about how the process works, do remember there is an entire playlist on my channel, scroll down, called Screenwriting Step by Step, in which, and I was thinking about the fact that I did this because it's been a while now. It's been, I think, over a year since I did it. 240 hours of letting you watch my working through the process. So if you feel like dipping into that here and there to get a sense of work process, it's there for you. Okay. Okay. All right. Thumper says, modern physics asserts that entropy can only ever increase. In other words, we are constantly getting more complex. More often than not, human endeavor is an attempt to reverse well, it's interesting because entropy is saying everything is falling into the simplicity of chaos. If everything is complicated and nothing is above the other, one of the main things that we do is, like I said, deciding one element is more important or collecting smaller bits into larger forms or abstracting. All of those things are anti-entropy. Absolutely. Entropy, as I understand it, is the falling apart of structures, the decaying to an equal spot, to the norm. If everything breaks down into its component pieces, eventually everything is just the same. So yeah, we are often fighting that. The simple field gets multidimensional. The critters in the bush you don't see who's taking the picture, why they're. Yes, writers have to edit. Right, exactly. That's the point. That in fact, even by taking that picture that I took of the tangle of trees, I was choosing a section of a much larger, even more complicated reality. By choosing to frame it, I was writing it. I was making it into a picture. The way that words or storytelling make something into a story. Entropy is not the same as complexity, and entropy is in a way the opposite of complexity, because everything becomes the same. Change my goddess script back to a series. Good. I actually think that's not a bad idea. Creating the series Bible and working. Yes. Donna has run into the problem that she has a very complex story, and she was trying to compress it down into a feature length. And feature length there's a lot of stories you can't tell, or you can't do justice to, I think. And that's okay. It's just we have to recognize that form for a long time was the only screen entertainment there was, and so therefore we understood it as such. Although even then, even when movies were just in movie theaters and only came out every once in a while, there were serials which combated that. Just Paul says, I look at it as such. Take a step back, look at the thing, break it down into 3 to 5 parts. I will not say 3 to 5, but yeah, break it down into parts. Those will explain and describe the thing to a standard that you will understand the complex thing. Yes, I think without the 3 to 5 parts, but to say we are always looking at things and we are trying to define it in a form that will let us understand it. That is the function of art. It's a way of taking the way the mind works and giving it an external way to communicate or capture. Justify this to the producer. Yeah, no, like I said, I am not in any way saying that this is going to go over great with the industry. Hi, Lucy Milo. Happy to see you. The film IDA is such a great example. I don't know that film. I will take a look at it. I have never. Oh, Ida, or it's probably Ida, actually, not IDA. Okay, cool. Thank you for the recommendation. Entropy is about everything assuming that the most likely configuration. Art is always about picking out something. Yes, exactly. No, not always, but this is true. These are great philosophical thoughts. Anyway, I just wanted to raise for you the question, to remember that there is a important balance that your job is of finding ways to simplify the complexity of our life, and at the same time finding ways to get the richness, the complicatedness of life into the simplicity of the form. That's a balance. It's not right. It's not wrong. You'll never solve it. You'll never get it all to be one thing or the other. That's the point of balances as I define them. It's something that you constantly have to recognize the value of both sides. And I just wanted to talk about that because sometimes in the business of entertainment, you will find that people advocate for just this. There's just one side, and that's all. And sometimes you get to really artsy people; they just argue for complexity and no simplicity. I just believe in the balance, and with that, I think I'm going to sign off. I am going to say see you next week. It has been delightful. Thank you for discussing this in such detail and raising such great questions. I hope you go write something.